It's episode 284 of The Platformers, a show about games and nerd culture, and I am your host, Brian Barnett.
I am another host, Kris Cornelisse, aka Delphi.
And I am the final host, Will Borger. What's up?
The final host. He said the name of the thing. He said it's a Final Fantasy. Yeah. Will is the final. I hope he's not the final host. I'd like to have some other people on this show. You know, some people that
I'm currently the final host.
I guess that is true. Until there's another host that comes on after you, you're the final host, and then they will usurp your final throne.
But you know the nice part about that though is that means the thing is continuing.
That's true.
So it's not entirely a bad thing to not be being the last of something is usually either really good or really bad.
Yeah, and sometimes both. Because
sometimes simultaneously, right?
Yeah, sometimes you reach the pinnacle of something and it can never be surpassed, which is great for you, but then also sad for everybody else.
They could never make another. They could sit on Devil May Cry 5, and that'd be a perfect endpoint. But we would be sad that it is the endpoint because we want more Devil May Cry.
Yeah,
yes. There is ups and downs.
Speaking of Devil May Cry. I finished Final Fantasy XVI just moments ago, and so this I'm gonna be giving my full review thoughts on that as well, and what I think, having been a fan of both Final Fantasy and Devil May Cry and all that sort of stuff. That should be fun. I do want to jump into that, but I also wanted to say that we're also going to talk a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3. I know that I'm
so excited.
We all want Will to go into talking about EVO, and I mean, if we want to, I mean, this is I will. We probably shouldn't. Never mind. I don't necessarily want to wade into Discourse on the show. We could.
I do.
You do?
I choose violence. Let me off the leash.
You do choose violence.
I do not want peace. I want a problem.
Problems.
I want problems.
Always, yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps we should not start the show with problems.
Possibly.
Problems are like a good ending point. Problems are a good middle point. You should almost never start with problems.
Yeah, let's not start with
get people happy.
That's
Ease
true.
people into it.
That's true. So I tell you what. Let me go through my review of Final Fantasy XVI, and then we can dive into either problems or EVO. I want to also save Baldur's Gate discussion for a little bit later in the show. Just know, dear listener, dear viewer, that I am definitely planning on, as weird as an open-ended game like this would look in that, I am fully planning on doing a spoiler cast and deep dive on Baldur's Gate 3. It's gonna.
We're all gonna discover new things about the plot from every single person that is there.
Yeah,
because it's that kind of game.
Yeah, I for one, just as a random aside, I've learned a lot of people are running Asterion on their teams, and I didn't even find that guy until like 15 hours into the game.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
I'm not running him, but that's because I'm playing a rogue. So,
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm not running Gale because I'm a sorcerer. And I'm just like,
that's fair.
I'm just like, yeah, I don't, you can suffer over there in your corner alone. I'm just not going to pay attention to you. But anyways.
Double caster, not a bad idea, but we'll get to that.
It's not a bad idea.
Don't get me started or I'll dominate the podcast of Baldur's Gate talk. So.
Speaking of dominance, anyways, no, but yeah, a big part of why I chose my party the way that I did is because I was doing guides for Baldur's Gate 3 for GameSpot, which you can go check out over on the Baldur's Gate 3 guide hub at GameSpot. So I wrote the guides and best builds for Fighter, Ranger, and Sorcerer, and I created a tier list and a what class should I play guide over there. So if you're looking to jump into Baldur's Gate 3, I put a lot of information into that tier list and which class should I pick, including detailed descriptions of all of the character classes, what they have proficiencies in, who they team well with, so that if you can just choose if you've seen like a video or something like that, and you're like, ooh, I like her, she's super cute, or I like him, I want to make love to him in bear form, then you can do that and be like, okay, who would, fill the gap and all that sort of stuff. That's pretty good. Polar Knights in the chat says, wow, I love this. It's the perfect evolution of beard growth. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
This isn't even my final form.
It's true. It's true. His beard has only just begun to fight. But yeah.
Well, it's more that I trimmed it significantly, like a month or two back. It was significant. So
yeah,
I had the pandemic beard, but pre-pandemic. So
it's true. It's true. But anyways, that's what I've been doing with Baldur's Gate. But on to Final Fantasy XVI. I just rolled credits on that. I've been distracted with work stuff and all sorts of stuff. But it's Final Fantasy XVI is a very long game, which is probably not going to surprise anybody because Final Fantasy games tend to run a little bit long, and a lot of recent games have run really long. I think that's been one of our main kind of refrains as we've played more game of the year contenders or big AAA offerings, is that they just kind of overstay their welcome. One thing I like about Final Fantasy XVI is that it isn't super egregious if you just stick with the main path, but the game clearly doesn't want you to do that. Now, I never got level gated.
Not with that idea yet.
Yeah, I never got level gated. I never had any issues where I ran into a brick wall. It was just that Final Fantasy 16 has the bullet sponge boss issue that a lot of games have. And I think that the combat in this game is really, really great. But I will say that I think that at a certain point in the game, the game flows better if you switch from action mode to story mode, because the enemies have so much health that fights just go on interminably. And they still are long when you switch to story mode and stuff, but it kind of evens it out. So that's what I did for the last 3 hours of the game, maybe. Which, man, let me tell you, if I had to redo some of those boss fights, I might be a little salty. But overall, I think it's good. One of the things that I think really stands out about the game is I think Clive as a protagonist is really great. I think that some of the supporting cast is great. I think Cid is great. I think there's some other characters. Everybody loves Cid. Everybody loves Cid in every iteration of Final Fantasy game. Cid is always great. But I think that this has. Now, I have not played Final Fantasy 15 more than maybe the first 2 hours or so. I don't remember.
Yeah, not missing out.
Yeah. So I can't speak to that, but I do think that 16 has some of the 14 problem where it's very clearly heavily influenced by Final Fantasy 14. And the way that Final Fantasy XIV structures story is, I think, one of the weakest in the series. That's because it's an MMO, which is fine, and that's what those do. People typically don't go to MMOs for really amazing stories. And I should say, I'm only up to about to begin Heavensward in 14. So a lot of the stuff that's supposed to be super great is after where I've played.
Yeah.
But I don't think that changes
you're
anything
hitting
that I
some
would
of the
say.
weaker parts of it. So, and then it starts to, do some world building and stuff and set up. And then Heavensward starts. It's this is what it was all leading to. Here it gets good.
Yeah.
Yada, yada, yada.
But I don't think that changes any of my complaints structurally. And I definitely did prefer the old way of structuring Final Fantasy stories in that they flow more. There isn't the start and stop of missions. It was just, we kind of need to go here. In Final Fantasy IX, there's no missions. It's just, we need to get to this next town. Let's figure out how we can get to this town. We go through the mountain pass. We find one of the wizards and stuff like that. Vivi has this great, experience, all this sort of stuff. it felt way more natural. And I think that a lot of the 14 influence that I'm feeling is like kind of the, you know, it has the thing that a lot of cinematic games have where like you'll do something, you'll get a cutscene, you'll walk 10 more feet, you'll get another cutscene. Like that happens a lot in this game, which isn't necessarily bad, but the game is clearly trying to immerse you with how long some of these cinematic cutscenes are, with how, with like the emotion that the characters are going for. And I think that when you end a really tough fight and then there's like a little choral note and then a huge, like, you know, beast slain or whatever pops up on the screen, and then a bunch of experience pops up and rewards pop up, and, you know, 55 bloodied hides, 55 gil, 55, you know, like all that sort of stuff. Like it's just, it's, I think we could have, I don't know. I think it could have been done a bit more elegantly. And I also find that 16 suffers from 14's problem of like all the faces for all the characters except Clive look really weird. Not only Clive, like there are some other ones that like look fine, but like a lot of the ladies, like their faces just look like not right. It's weird. Some of the guys too, like Joshua's face looks really strange, and they look like characters from 14.
I think they literally have some of the character models from 14 lifted for some of the NPCs. I've heard that from at least one person I follow who said, I recognize this goddamn face from this goddamn character. That guy is wearing my character's face, you know?
Yeah.
So there's probably at least a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I think it suffers a little bit from that, but like there's legitimately other times like towards the end of the game where I'm like, wow, this is literally one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Like, so when there's some parts where like the lighting is like just right over like Clive's like leather armor and cloak, it's in the darkness, and there's like stone steps and stuff where it just like really excels. But a lot of the time they do like stark light everywhere, and it just doesn't look like amazing. But yeah, overall, I'm generally positive on it. I think it's pretty good. I think it might be, I think it's premature to say Final Fantasy is like back because I still think that 7 remake might still be pound for pound better. But I think that what 16 does better is the combat, and I think that is really awesome. It's just it's weird because it's not what we typically come to Final Fantasy for. And like not having the party structure, having just control of one character, it's way more a character action game. And I think that fusing those two things works, but I think that a lot of character action games are like 8 to 10 hours for a reason, you know. There is depth to be had here. One thing that I thought was a little bit frustrating, and I'm not going to talk about who or what, but yesterday or today, I got a new like set of abilities, and I was like, wow, you really held literally my favorite thing until like right before the end of the game, which was like kind of disappointing because I was like, man, I want like more time to play with this. Now there is New Game Plus. I am not planning on doing that. Like maybe someday, but I don't know. But,
come back to it. It's still a bit too fresh to go through it all again.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting. I think that had this released in a year where there wasn't also just an absolute embarrassment of games that I also want to play, and there was more room for it, I could have like savored it more, stretched it out more, done a lot of side quests, and really like dove into it, because I think there is stuff here. And I definitely think that this is way, way, way better than 15. Way better. So
I've seen like half an hour of it, and it's like, yeah, it's probably better than 15. Like,
yeah.
That's
the combat in 15. Like if you're gonna go with an action-based game, the combat needs to feel good, and it felt way too floaty. and the hits did not feel substantial at 15. It just felt like you were like, I was flicking somebody with like a paper towel or something that I'd folded into a sword. It was no good. And this game, it feels way better. So yeah.
Also, the key to victory in combat in that was just hold down circle.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not press. It's not time. It's not do anything. It's hold down circle. You can do extra stuff if you want, but otherwise just hold down circle.
Yeah. And there's a bit of that in this game where like one of the things that I found, one of my standbys was basically like just bouncing between the square and triangle buttons rhythmically, and then like adding in like precision sick, like abilities from Torgal, like the dog and stuff like that. So like getting into that sort of a rhythm, and you can expand it a little bit, but it does get like a little, until you get like a good balance of abilities that you can rotate between like frequently. It can get a little monotonous sometimes. And the health differential between some of your basic enemies and like the heavy hitters can be a little obnoxious because they don't die anywhere near the same time. Like I can literally focus on like, they'll spawn an armored enemy with a stagger bar and then a bunch of basic enemies. I'll literally just ignore all of the basic enemies and focus on the big one. And by the time he's at like 75% health remaining, everybody else has been dead for like a minute based off of just like...
long enough to have forgotten that it wasn't just a one-on-one, yeah.
Yeah. Just random errant swings are just taking other guys out, which is like, I don't know. I find that a little bit unsatisfying, but
it's very anyways, Dynasty Warriors.
Yeah. It's not that bad, but yeah.
The Dynasty Warriors is built on excess, whereas FF16 is not.
Yeah. I shared a clip on Twitter where like, excuse me. There was an enemy, there was an armored enemy that came around a corner, and I was like, all right, I've got like this really, really, really powerful beam ability that's like 5 out of 5 stars for damage. And I just shot him right in the chest with the entire lengthy beam. And he still had 75% of his health left. And I'm like, you're telling me that this...
He just Broly'd that shit. He just
that this regular man can tank 4 beams from a fucking dragon and be fine? Or like, it'll take 4 to kill him. Like, not 3, not 1. And I'm just like, come on, guys. Like, come on. At a certain point...
Taking 4 beams from a dragon out of context would be...
Whoa, we're talking about Baldur's Gate 3, what?
Take it...
I just heard about taking 4 somethings from a dragon, and now I'm like... I woke up, let me tell you.
Will has been awakened. His slumbering furry gene stirs.
Look, all I'm saying is there was a normal conversation happening, and then there wasn't a normal conversation happening. I was like, wait, hold up. I thought we were talking about combos and shit.
It is true. Anyways, all that to say, I think that Final Fantasy XVI is definitely worth your time. I highly recommend getting a Vitrix BFG Pro if the PS5 controller causes you hand pain, because I was able to play the entirety of the game pretty extensively and pretty like intensively. And I only had like just the begin. Like I've literally been playing Final Fantasy XVI for like 8 hours today or something like that, and like my hand is just starting to like be a little tingly, so I'm definitely gonna rest it, and all that sort of stuff, but it's definitely far more comfortable with how button mashy it is than the stock PS5 controller. But yeah, so we are currently planning to do a Final Fantasy 16 deep dive and spoiler cast, but we're just working on scheduling. So until then, let me give you my my thumb up on if you've been interested in FF16 and you have access to a PS5, Kris.
One day it'll come out on PC.
Then
one day,
yeah. Then go get it. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely, I think it's definitely in my top 5 this year. I think that what's really going to clench my game of the year is going to be a lack of complaint. I think it's going to be one of those situations where it's just like, which of these games came out had like the fewest big downsides, and it's just going to come down to that. So I'm very interested. It's going to be a very engaging game of the year episode, I think. So,
yo, you know, the funny thing is, you could put like any of the top 15 games from this year against like a lesser year, right? Like 2014, right? Like, what's the best game that year? Wolfenstein, maybe Alien Isolation. I'm not here for the Dragon Age Inquisition talk. Don't go there. It's too big. But like, 15th best game this year, better than all of them. Absurdly stacked year. I feel sorry for anybody who
even going back to like 2021 or whatever. There's like some games, and
yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy how it's been. Yeah. Anyways, that's Final Fantasy 16.
Eating good.
Dig it. Clive, one of the better FF protagonists.
And he's so hot.
You heard it here too. He
So
really is. And you know what's fucking really unfair? Have you seen the videos where his voice actor like is on screen? His voice
Also
actor
hot.
is super hot too. Like, what the fuck, dude? That's not fair.
Ben, you're so pretty.
And his
Bro,
voice
like,
is
so
great,
pretty.
too.
His voice is great. He's so pretty.
So willing to go out on Twitter and just say stupid shit in character.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
Dude, him
When I
and
grow up, I
Alex
wanna-
Lee are awesome. Like,
When I grow up, I just want to be just like them, bro. Just like them.
dude, Clive and Luke out here being the change they want to see in the world. It's great. It's great. And I
Luke
say
from
that.
Streets.
And I say that.
The streets.
The streets of Memphis. And I say that with a staunch record of heterosexuality. I say all these things.
Okay, Brian.
It's
But I can
2023. Who cares anymore?
Yeah, who cares?
I'm saying like I'm not attracted to men at all, but I have
But
eyes.
but if you were,
But I
if you
have
were,
Gay.
But I have
But-
eyes. I can see things. You know. And I'm not gonna lie to the people. There's anyways.
you know, I'm not gonna couch. Ben, call me. Like, come on, man.
Yes.
Ben, you should probably call Will. He'll show you a good time.
That'd be quite the conversation to listen in on.
At
Least until it gets into Baldur's Gate 3 territory. You know.
Yeah. Anyways.
that is its own thing. That is its own date. You just have a date to talk about Baldur's Gate 3. Like you're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna go to the movies. You're not gonna have dinner. You're gonna open like a bag of cheap potato chips and like pour yourself a bad beer, and you're gonna talk about Baldur's Gate for the next 8 hours. That's your day. That's it. That's all there is.
That sounds like a good day.
You could be worse, right? Like,
Yeah.
be worse.
I think I did that on the weekend while I was away. Just, was very drunk after the post drinking, and then just went outside to get some air. And then me and my friend just kind of sat down and we talked about Baldur's Gate in like very drunk animated terms, like 20 minutes. It was a good time.
That sounds like a conversation that I wish I had been there for, because drunk conversations about stuff like that are always amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very, very drunk on the weekend when I don't normally drink that much. So I was away for the weekend, did the annual trip with a bunch of my friends where we just basically drove up a couple of hours up into the mountains. What passes for mountains in Australia anyway, flat. But do that. And then, buy a lot of booze, buy a lot of snacks and food, and just kind of do hedonistic excess for 3 days, just get away from it all, talk mad shit, and then recover from all of that, and then just play board games 2 days. So we have to come back. And it's the highlight of our years. And we do this every year for the last 6 years now, barring obviously 2021. We have lockdown in place. But other than that, yeah. So that's where I was.
Sick.
And that's that was basically me recovering my batteries for the last year or so. And then, but there was definitely a highlight I remember specifically where I just, after all the drinking games and such, I'm sitting there with, way too much whiskey and or absinthe in my belly and just going, you want to talk about Baldur's Gate 3? And then she's like, yes, I want to talk about Baldur's Gate 3. And then we sat and talked about Baldur's Gate 3 for like 20 minutes. It was good.
As
one of those
does.
conversations. But if I talk about Baldur's Gate 3 anymore, we'll just keep talking about Baldur's Gate 3. So
We will.
I will put that on the back burner for now.
We have things to get to today, sir. You will get your chance.
We do.
We do. I will say, I'm not actually like 47 hours into the game, but Steam thinks I am. So I don't actually know how far I am, but I will say I'm having a good time with it so far, and I'm excited to talk about more.
You can always check where your save file says you're at. So that's what I have to do because I have early access hours. So it says like, my friends are like, how do you have more than 100 hours in this game on like day 4? And I'm like, I'm just that good. But also I've been playing it for 3 years. So
Yeah, good stuff. I will have to do that and figure that out.
I think my save's at 57 hours, but that's a topic for another time.
Yeah. Will.
Yes.
We've been doing a couple of things lately. We've been doing some things. You've been doing some things. Tell me about them.
Oh man, where do I start? So last weekend, I flew out to Las Vegas, which is a catastrophe of a city, but also
really is
really wonderful at the same time. Like I don't know how these two things can coexist. If you plan to go to Las Vegas, the drinks are reasonably priced. The food is so. I ate a $28 hamburger.
Woof.
That was a good hamburger. In fairness, that was the best $28 hamburger I've ever had. It's the only $28.
It's the only one. It's so conversely, it's also the worst $28 hamburger you've ever had.
It's funny how life be that way sometimes.
Yep.
I have no standard of comparison for $28 hamburgers, but I was there because was it EVO? And I competed in Strive. I went 3-2, lost the final game to get out of my pools, but honestly, it's my first in-person tournament. I feel pretty good about it. And I basically spent the rest of the 3 days that I was there, hanging out, meeting some people. I met Mitch Salzman and Ronnie Barrier from IGN. Connor from VG 24/7. Shout outs to him. He has excellent taste in drinks. We bought each other round after round after round. And I got to play Project L. I got to sit in the arena and watch the finals. And let me tell you something. If you have ever watched EVO and you're like, I want to go. It is that much better in person. You get to see cool matches that happen off stream. I got to see Tokido play. There's 50 people crowded around the pool. People just watching, I'm sitting over here, leaning in with my camera, trying to get a picture.
I need to go to EVO before Dragon Ball is not a main stage event. Because I need to experience, if I can, who knows if anybody's going to play him, I need to experience a Cell Yell in person.
We got to do a Gogeta Yell. That was pretty cool.
That's pretty good.
A Cell Yell in person would be, that would be something else.
Just got a
it was amazing.
Hey,
like I said,
Cam, thanks for following. And thanks for being
Some
here.
of the best matches you will ever see, thank you, Cam, are not streamed. The Daigo versus Mena match in Street Fighter 6, not on stream. I got to see Rat, who I think is maybe the best melee in the world, play against Nage, who is an all-time Faust, off stream. Amazing set. One of the best sets I saw all weekend. Nobody streamed it. And while you're there, right, it's not just matches. You can do that. There's casuals. They've got a great arcade setup. You can spend way too much money on cool merch if you want to do that. I almost bought a snack box, and I looked at my bank account and restrained myself.
Because of all those rounds of drinks, man, and that $28 burger. If only you hadn't bought the $28 burger.
I needed food.
Yeah,
that was the night I got in.
Conventions and long travel, you need the food. I
needed food, okay? And
this is the junior version of the argument that everybody makes, which is if you just stopped eating avocado toast, you'd be able to buy a house.
A house, right? If only I could control my need for avocado, right?
Yeah.
My avocado fetish, if you will. My unhealthy obsession. I could own property. In fairness, I bought all the drinks after I decided I couldn't eat the snack box.
And I own this house. and I had avocado on my burger today. So there you
Well,
go.
la-dee-da.
There's two sides to every coin.
Brian is out here living the dream,
And you have
proving
both
the
of them
haters
because
wrong.
you have coin.
Yes, he has money and avocado, the impossible combination.
I also have a fucking cold, so something's got to give somewhere.
One of these things is not like the others.
It's true.
One of these things is slightly more annoying.
One of these
anyway,
things is very temporary.
Yes, the avocado definitely is temporary. Because
Yes,
that shit's gonna get
it's
eaten.
dude. It's already almost gone.
It is.
There you go.
Schrodinger's avocado, right? Like it can either exist and be looked at and appreciated, or it can be eaten. Anyway,
It could
so
be a drain
aside
on
from
your bank account, yeah.
yeah, I could buy like a snack box, or I could have avocado toast. Anyway, so aside from the fact that there's tournaments that you can play in and side tournaments and all this stuff that you can go buy, the cool thing about EVO is that everybody who is anybody in the fighting game space is there, and they all have booths. So you go play MK1, you go play Tekken 8. These games aren't out yet. There's a bunch of indies that are there with a bunch of really cool looking games, and I wish I got to see more of the stuff there. I got to play Project L. Let me tell you, folks, Project L is sick. It is so fun. It is immediately like easy to pick up and play. The characters feel really good. They've done a great job of like taking the characters and like the 5 moves that you have in League of Legends, right? Actually, it's 4, right? QWER.
4 moves and then the passive.
Your passive, right? Yeah. So they've taken characters that have 4 moves, right, and be like, we now have to make a kit, right? They have to have normals. Did a really good job. It's super fun to play. I wrote a very long preview for the loadout for it. Thank you. Shout outs to Echo Aspie, who sent me over to EVO with a press pass so I could do all this cool stuff. Much appreciated. But I will say that like if you've ever considered going to EVO, go to EVO, right? Like there's stuff that you will see there that it's not going to be streamed. One of the things was during the grand finals for not grand finals, but during the top 6 for Street Fighter 6. At one point, Capcom had a live band there, and they were playing intros for everybody. It was really cool. And then also, randomly, at one point, they were like playing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle theme, and they did not tell us why. So we're all sitting in this arena, 12,000 plus people, just singing all "Heroes in a Half Shell," and wondering why it's happening.
Yeah,
like why are we not making another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fighting game? And for a brief moment, I allowed myself hope, and then. It was costumes for Street Fighter 6, but it was cool to be there and singing along. During like commercial breaks, they have people come out and give away PS5s with rock paper scissors. They play games of high card. During Guilty Gear commercials, they were playing the songs in the arena. The entire arena is singing along to Smell of the Game. It's a very community based thing, and people, it's owned by Sony. It's a big esports thing, which is true. But you go there and you feel like, man, like. This is cool. All these people like the same stuff that I do. Everybody here is super passionate about fighting games. And, to watch those top 6s in person, to like talk to the players briefly. I got to very, very briefly on the way back home. Hikari, who won Dragon Ball FighterZ, was on the same plane as I was. I got to congratulate him, shake his hand, talk to him very, very briefly. But, stuff like that is just, it's funny. He was searching for a place where we were boarding to put his trophy, because the trophy's good size, right? He's searching the overhead bins. I can't find a place for it. He did eventually find it, but it's weird little stuff like that. Getting to meet people that you haven't met, getting to play players you wouldn't normally get to play. Just being in that environment and seeing all that stuff and getting to play those games early, and watch like Harada chase Ono off the stage because he makes like a Tekken Cross Street Fighter joke. Like that stuff is fantastic. And you don't, even if it's streamed, like it's not nearly as funny as being in person, being in that arena, meeting those people, playing those games. So
it's the atmosphere, it's the vibe.
Yeah, it is.
Especially
it is a
with
vibe.
the FGC. Everything I've heard about like the FGC in particular, fighting games, it's you guys are like real comparatively tight compared to most of the other, like scenes or anything in genre appreciators, if you will, in video games. There's nothing else quite like the FGC, and everyone says that about just most tournaments, but EVO in particular. It's just like, yeah, it's a vibe, and there's nothing else quite like it.
It was something. Being in that arena during the finals, there's a moment during the Street Fighter 6 top 6 where I don't want to spoil anything, but I kind of have to talk about it. it's the last game. Tokido is playing Hikaru, and Hikaru's got him in a combo that he probably could have killed with, but he goes for an overhead reset. And the gap between the end of the combo and the reset, Tokido does a super and takes the entire set. The entire arena stood up and cheered. 12,000 people. It was incredible. And there's nothing else like it. So EVO was amazing. I'm glad I got to go. I'm glad I got to spend time with so many cool people. I'm glad I got to play Project L. And I will be going back. So trust me, I was always one of those people, one year I'm going to go to EVO. Just go. If you're thinking about going, if you're thinking about playing, it doesn't matter if you go into, just go, have a good time, meet some new friends, spend way too much money in Las Vegas.
It's on my bucket list for sure.
Play some fighting games, right? I'm going back next year. I'm going back every year. It was great.
Obviously I can't go every year just because of, there's this little thing called the Pacific Ocean in the way, but like,
unfortunate.
One time I definitely want to go before
the
before
best
all this kind of winds up.
The best body of water in all the land. It's crazy.
Best, possibly. Biggest, certainly. Most annoying to traverse, definitely.
Definitely.
If it's the most annoying to traverse, it doesn't sound like the best to me. Anyway.
Hey, as long as you're on the side that you want to be on, it's great.
I suppose that's fair, yeah. So anyway, EVO's
trust
fantastic.
me, I'm there. Yeah. It's just only when EVO comes along that I'm like, maybe I'm on the wrong side of the pond. No.
Just for a little bit.
But there is going to be, they announced this year that there's going to be, EVO Japan, and there's also going to be a third EVO sometime this year that they have not announced a place for yet. So maybe, Kris, it'll be closer to you. And you can go.
Probably going to be in Europe, but that would be my guess. But I mean, EVO Australia, like there is a PAX Oz, so you never know.
Yeah.
You never know, right? And the tournament has become big enough at this point that, you might as well. So that was what I did this weekend. And then can I change the subject, Brian, to the next thing that I did?
Sure. As I'm like sitting here thinking about like EVO Singapore or Kiwi EVO or something like that.
Yeah.
EVO down.
EVO China, EVO India. Who knows?
I don't know if it's going to be in the kind of the East because they have EVO Japan, right? So I would imagine that's where a lot of that competition comes from.
And honestly,
which I would
Singapore
love to go see.
To Japan is like not that far, so just go to Japan.
Yeah, it's really not.
Yeah, I would love to see those players compete because a lot of the really good players from China and Japan and that region, Korea, don't really travel much. Some of the really good Japanese players for Guilty Gear did travel, but I don't think people would consider like the three best players from that region. Daru, obviously amazing. He was there. But when I got back, because the grind never stops, I've been reading this. And this is Halo Outcasts by Troy Denning. This is kind of be a review in progress. I'll finish it up next week because I'm not quite done with the book yet. But I want to say thank you to Casey from Simon & Schuster for sending this to me. And as someone who's read a good chunk of the Halo books, I wasn't really, and then like kind of took a break for a while and then got back and took a bit of a break. This is actually quite good. It's set between Halo 5 and Halo Infinite. It's following the Arbiter.
A section that desperately needs some fleshing out.
Right. It follows the Arbiter and one of the characters from Halo 5, Olympia, who's one of the Spartans that you can play out on Locke's team in that game. And it's about, what do you do when like the world is ruled by a superpowered AI who has these death machines that can blow up planets, right? So they're trying to figure out like, we would really not like to be controlled by evil Cortana, giant spaghetti monster Cortana. And it's also got an air of mystery to it because they find this stuff that, hints to this civilization that's older than the Forerunners. If you know the lore, you kind of know where this is going. But it's got some really interesting character moments. It's a very quick read so far. And I really enjoy that we're getting some perspectives in these in the Halo lore that we don't always get, right? Like it's rare to kind of get something from the Arbiter's perspective, or at least in the books, or like some of the other Spartans. So happens not all the time, but it's a neat little book. And like I said, it's very, very easy to read, a lot of fun. And the characters have like very funny moments. There's this great bit where the Arbiter's like sitting in his like little place that he has, and he's like looking at his mural he's had commissioned to like record, the things that he's done, and he's like, that's my favorite one. That's me and the chief killing the flood. I like that one. He's just sitting there thinking. So it's a fun little book, and I'll have final thoughts again next week. But I am really enjoying it so far, and I do think it's really great that they're taking the time to flesh out the stuff between Halo 5 and it, because you get to the end of Halo 5 and you're like, okay, and then you start Halo Infinite, and you're like, wait a minute, hold up, what
They didn't
happened?
talk about any of that.
I'm
They
missing
just
like
kind of quickly veered away from that because everyone hated 5. And it's like, but there's potential here. There's areas we need filled in. Give
The
us
reason we hated 5 is because we were given a false bill of sale. Like, they bait and switched us. The thing that, like, if you look at the, and I think we've talked about this, I've talked about this with you guys before. If not, here we go. But, like, the lead up to Halo 5 is some of the most excited I've ever been for Halo. And I think maybe for just gaming, because it seemed like they were going to do something really interesting. And then
the build up and the hype and the marketing for that was big time. I do recall that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it had a great marketing campaign, you know, all that stuff, right? It had really cool trailers. It had like that audio series.
That
right?
podcast series was really good with Keegan-Michael Key.
They did a bunch of really neat stuff, and then the game is like, yeah, this isn't that at all.
Yeah, it's not about that at all. And I was just like,
and the actual writer is like, wait, you guys like Master Chief? You think he's the main character? Why? And, no, it's about this cool guy. He's Locke. He's cool, and they just kind of lost the plot and had to, last minute course correct and do all this. And it's a mess. It was a mess.
And the thing that sucks is that Locke could have been. This could have been like. Now I know that I'm
really good.
I'm probably in the minority where like I really like Raiden. Like I'm not necessarily just a Solid Snake guy. Like I like them both. And this could have been a Metal Gear Solid 2 where they introduce a character and then this character becomes a mainstay. Locke could have been like a new main character in Halo. And I don't think that Locke is a bad character. I just think they just didn't know what to do with him. And that that bums me out more than anything. It's Halo 5 is a story about missed opportunities and squandered potential because it had tons of it. And it just didn't they just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, and it's good to see like some of the stuff getting picked up in this book and explained about like, hey, here's like this gap that we're gonna try to fill in a little bit. Well, also like kind of spotlighting these not lesser known, but like characters that don't get as much of the spotlight as like the main players, stuff like that. And it's nice to see like other. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just as an aside, you were talking about side characters that don't get a lot of play. The operative on Locke's team that knows Sangheili, I would play an entire ODST game that was just about her. Like, I want to know.
I'm pretty sure that's Olympia, and she's one of the main characters.
Oh, okay. I mean, awesome. Yeah, like she's super fascinating. Like, she's just like, oh, I'm gonna learn about the elite culture. Like, and I'm just gonna be like somebody who can interpret that and like explain that and sort of stuff. Like, that's so interesting to me as like a. Hey, if aliens are real and if they're here, question mark, like, wouldn't you want to learn about their culture? Like, wouldn't that be a fascinating thing? Wouldn't you want to learn how to talk to them and that sort of thing? Like,
if only as a world building exercise, then it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and like a good chunk of the stories up to the point that I'm at is about like, she has a background in xenoarchaeology. It's about like the culture that she's kind of like found herself ingratiated in as kind of like a representative liaison, if you will, and like how things are handled in that culture, right? So it's pretty interesting so far. Again, I will have like a final review next week, but so far I'm very much enjoying it. This is out right now, actually. It came out last week. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, you can go buy it. And I will have final thoughts on it next week for everybody who is a little bit unsure or would like to hear more.
Cool.
Keen to hear it.
Sounds good. Will's Book Corner. The sequel.
Yes, please.
The sequel to Audrey's
PR
Book
people.
Corner.
Send me books. I'll review books on the podcast. I love books. Anyway, so that's
in general. Read more, everybody.
Yeah,
Just
and read anything, right? Like read your game novels. Read go read Moby Dick. Read House of Leaves. Read the classics. Read.
I don't know if I told you, but I read. Did I tell you guys about the Elden Ring manga? Did I talk about that on the show?
I don't believe so.
Audrey got me the first issue, the first trade of the Elden Ring manga, which is a comedy, by the way. Like, it is totally a different like vibe. It's got all of the characters from that. It's got Blythe and Melina, and the Tarnished. It's got all of these things, but it's just a comedy. It just takes all of the piss out of Elden Ring and just is all
that
jokes.
Sounds kind of great, to be honest.
awesome, dude. It's so awesome. And the best thing is that like you could do a super grim dark like edgelord thing with Elden Ring so easily. And the fact that they decided on the official manga release to do like the opposite of that is like it's great. It's great. So there you go. There's Brian's book corner.
Not a direct novelization, just an alternate. What if we had a sense of humor with it?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So yeah, read more books. I concur.
And I've got other stuff, but I feel like I should let somebody else talk for a bit.
You probably should. Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. For the most part, it's been Baldur's Gate all the way down. Then there was the trip I took recently. I suppose I can mention while I was away, everybody brings out the Switch. Yeah, sometimes we set it up, we play Mario Kart and or Smash Bros or some other stuff. There was a lot of Mario Kart happening in the background. I didn't partake in it, but often I will just have like a couple of indie games or whatever loaded up on my Switch and just play through that. And what I've been doing there is, for a start, I talked about Cassette Beasts on last podcast, I believe I did. Mm-hmm. I finished that. I maintain everything I said about that. That is great. That is the best monster catching game I've played in a while. Just it does enough clever, interesting things in terms of both mechanics and setting and everything to stand out and not just be Pokemon at home. And I loved it. I thought it was very enjoyable. I highly recommend it. I wouldn't have recommended it for the Switch because the performance was bad. However, they have since patched it and it's much better now. So if you ever heard me say anything about that anywhere, it's fine now. Go get it. Give it a go. That was that. But then once I finished that, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And I was staring at Zelda. And I still need to do the ending sequence of that. I still don't feel like it. So I went and replayed a game I had played a while back from last year, I believe it was. Which is a little indie game called I Was A Teenage Exocolonist.
Oh.
Have you guys heard of this one?
Yes. I almost reviewed that a ways back. I've heard good things.
Yeah, it caught me by surprise how much I liked it previously. So it came out last year. I think just one of my local buddies has mentioned it as something he was keeping an eye on. So I picked it up on a whim when I saw it on the Switch and played it, and have since played through it like 5 goddamn times. I got another full completion or 2 on this trip just when I was just in downtime and everything. But so how it works is, as the name implies, you are a teenage exocolonist. You are a character who is you start the game at the age of 10, go through a little brief thing or whatever, and then you act out the next 10 years of the character's life through the trials and tribulations of landing on this alien planet with alien ecosystems, weird, shit going on. There's a big wormhole in the sky that's basically, 1, how you got there, and 2, starts having these weird, almost, time manipulation effects later on, and figure out you're in a time loop, which is why I do so many loops so many playthroughs of it, and you can start experiencing the dreams and memories of former lives and such, which ends up having mechanical benefits when you replay it, because you just go, if you've done certain events, you just have new options that go, hang on, I've done this before. And then you can streamline certain effects or whatever and overcome challenges or correct deaths which are guaranteed, like characters can die in the first run through, and you can just go, hang on, go and save them and do little things like that. And that can change the outcome a lot. You have extra people to talk to and interact with and things like that. But so it ends up being sort of like a time management narrative RPG kind of thing. So it's like every year is 13 months effectively that is split up into 13 turns. And you just pick something to do that time, which can, typical narrative RPG kind of thing. You'd go and it's like, I'm going to increase this stat, or I'm going to go talk to this person, or I'm going to go on an expedition to this region and just do different things and chase different objectives, progress through all the stuff, and just, learn more about the characters, the world, the previous alien occupants of the world, and just kind of determine the outcome of both your life, the colony, whether it lives, dies, all this kind of stuff. And it's really solid. It's got some really good writing, some fun characters, just very interesting world building exercises. And the past lives time loop kind of thing does play into a lot of it and does really encourage replayability. So that's why I'm just like, haven't played through it in like about a year or so. I'm just like, I'm feeling it. I'll go give it another run through. And yeah. And then the actual challenges and jobs and things are usually represented by, effectively you're playing like a deck building game. So every major thing you do gives you a card, which represents a memory of something you've done. And then it'll have like, the card will have a value, a suit, and then you're just basically playing, card poker, just certain challenges. You gotta, you get bonus points for getting pairs, flushes, straights, all the usual stuff. And all the little, so it's just a case of, building the deck to be able to overcome challenges, going into the challenges that you're suited for, and everything else. And it ends up being super fun, really engaging.
I texted Audrey because I was like, hey, I just found out about a time management game that sounded kind of interesting. And she's like, time management game? Just open the door.
It's called I Was a Teenage Exocolonist. You should absolutely play it.
Yeah. I'll get her all the info on that later. But yeah. She's, she actually came on to review a game on this show a long time ago called This Is the Police, which is a really great like management simulator. And it's also all about corruption.
I have heard about that one, yeah. Yeah, no, I think she'd love it. So, yeah. I certainly love it. So, yeah, good time.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Cool. Will, did you have some other stuff that you wanted to talk about? I do want to dip into a little bit about Baldur's Gate 3, just like early impressions of the first few hours, but we can save that for our last thing. Actually, you know what? Let's save that. Let's save Baldur's Gate 3 as the palate cleanser after us wading into violence. How about that?
Oh, I was going to talk about another game, but we can do violence if you want.
Oh, you want to talk about another game if you want.
Talk about another game?
We got time.
Go for it.
Yes. So I got to preview Battle Shapers, which, if you've never heard of it, it's an upcoming indie game. I wrote about it for IGN, but I wanted to talk about it here because I think it's really cool. I really enjoyed it. And it's basically a cross between Doom Eternal, Hades, and Mega Man. If I had to pitch it to somebody, Doom Eternal in that it's first-person shooter, very fast combat. You regain shields and sometimes health by killing people. And Mega Man in that, hey, there's a bunch of like bad robots. You got to go take them out, steal their powers, which makes your character different. Very cool. And then it's got a roguelike elements where, when you die, you lose a good chunk of your progress, but you also are gaining things that you can keep for the long term, new weapons, new upgrades, etc. So the demo that I got to play, the preview build that I got to play, featured one of the robot bosses and one of the areas. And the areas are cool because, they're kind of randomly put together. So you're going to get a different run through the same tower every time you do it. You'll have different weapons, and the really cool thing is you have these things called cores, which allow your character to kind of change what they're good at. There were two in the build that I played. One of them was Adamant, which was kind of a defensive core. It's your default, like it allows you to reflect projectiles and use your kind of melee attack to also just go through them. And the other one was an offensive thing, which basically allowed you to dash through people. And once you stacked up 3 dashes, you could do like a super attack where you just zoomed around and hit a bunch of people if you targeted them. So there's lots of different play styles. The guns feel really good. It looks gorgeous. It looks kind of like Overwatch and that kind of same stylized art style. But
very color heavy. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, very colorful, very bright, very funny, honestly. Like listening to the characters' banter was hilarious. Just this really, really cool game that I believe is this year. It's soon.
It says on the Steam page Q3, so
yeah, soon.
Next month.
Soon. So if you haven't had a chance to look at Battle Shapers, I highly, highly recommend it. If you want more information, you can see my preview up on IGN. But I think it's a really, really cool game, and not enough people have heard about it. So I wanted to do my, my duty and tell you, keep an eye on Battle Shapers, y'all. It's really cool.
Keeping an eye on it officially.
Yeah.
You have my curiosity, and now you have my attention.
Excellent. That's what I'm here for.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. All right.
Violence? Is it violence time?
Kris, what do you think? Should we let Will off the leash?
Yeah, do it. Let him go. Let him cook.
All right, Will. Tell the people what's going on in the world of video games.
Okay, so I think I know what we're talking about, but maybe you should tee me up, Brian, in case we're not on the same wavelength. You set it up and I'll...
Well, you and I... So my thought was, you and I had a conversation earlier today with some third parties about some stuff that's been scuttlebutt around related to Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay, all right, we're on the same page.
Now,
why don't you set it up and I'll go from there?
Well, there's been... Baldur's Gate 3 has come out. It's come out to a lot of positive critical reception.
Overwhelming critical acclaim, big sales numbers. It's doing great.
It is, I think, the number one highest rated game on OpenCritic of all time at a 97. But I think that it is also, I think it's tied or like 1 point ahead of something like GTA 5 or Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild or something like that. But those have like way more reviews than Baldur's Gate has. So there is an idea that, okay, maybe this is just like very enthusiast people that are into it. You know, the Dark Souls thing where like Elden Ring gets a 10 because people who love Souls reviewed it, this sort of a thing. I don't really care much to talk about that because I think that there is an element of self-selection that you have to do when you're in this job because like, are you gonna, like, you wouldn't necessarily hire me, a person who doesn't love racing sims or have really any appreciation or depth of knowledge for those to review like Forza Motorsport 8. Like there's better people to do that.
Conversely, you also don't want to put a guy who is, super hyper selective and is going to not represent the full body of people who are actually going to be playing or reviewing or anything.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, you give me a strategy game or whatever. I'm not representative of the average person playing a strategy game because that's what I do. So there's a balancing act.
And Dan Stapleton has gone into this on Twitter on multiple occasions where he talks about like there are multiple perspectives that are really valuable. One is I've never done this thing before. How is it for me? And I've done all of these things before. How does it hold up with the context of the genre and all that sort of stuff? Like, how welcoming is it? How much does the game assume that you just know what to do instead of actually properly explaining it? There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. And I'm not going to talk about any of that right now. We're going to talk about something else. The fact that the game has been so positively reviewed and is like breaking Steam concurrent records when games do this, people talk about them. And a lot of people are talking about this. A lot of people are talking about Baldur's Gate 3. A lot of people are talking about bear sex. They're talking about, who in their party.
Give the people what they want.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They're talking about how hot Karlach is, both literally and figuratively.
Smoking, one could say.
Smoking, indeed. There's a lot that people are talking about. People are talking about the open-ended, solutions. They're talking in a lot of similar ways to Tears of the Kingdom earlier this year. They're talking about, I thought of a possible solution to this situation, and I was just able to do it. I'm having a hard time beating this boss straight up, so I literally just pushed them over a cliff, and now they're dead. Like, they just fell into an endless ravine or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm going to, there's a house that's on fire, and I opened this door, and there was a backdraft, and that causes a huge freaking problem. There's a lot of, like, immersive sim type stuff, but since this is the Forgotten Realms and this is Dungeons & Dragons, that's kind of like expected. It's just really been hard to deliver on in the video game front. And this is, I think, at least so far as what I have played, one of the best examples that we've had.
Absolutely.
Because there's been a lot of talk about this game and how great it is, and all of that sort of stuff, there has been a bit of a controversy, and there have been some people who I guess will determine whether they are nameless or not, have been talking about how consumers should demand more, they should expect more, and that Baldur's Gate 3 should raise expectations across the industry, at the very least in this genre. But I think that the talk has kind of branched out and kind of been, it's become somewhat all-encompassing. I don't know if that was necessarily the intention, but I think that was the result. And there's been some pushback on that as well. So Will and I had a big talk about this earlier, and he really wanted to talk about this. So now that I feel like I've kind of set the stage, Will, take it away.
Yes, and Brian did so with your usual empathy and clear-headedness and background. So that anybody who hasn't, if you haven't been on Twitter in the last few days, God bless you. I'm not calling it X's Twitter. If you're happily like trotting along, like I'm just playing Baldur's Gate 3 and I'm having a good time and I'm not involved in the Discord, God bless you.
Maybe turn off the show if you want to stay that way.
Yeah, maybe just skip the next few minutes or so. Just chill, like go make yourself a sandwich, pour yourself a nice drink, hug your wife, your husband, your children, your spouse of indeterminate gender. Have a good time, right?
Pat the dog.
Go pet
Pat
the dog.
Scratch. He's a good boy.
Cuddle with your cat. If you have a pet rat, take him out of his cage and
go
play
tell
with him,
Torgal
right?
hello.
Go tell Torgal hello first. Have a good time, and come back in a little bit. So I don't want to put anybody on blast for this. I'm not going to go into specifics about people because this position has been communicated to me by several people, including people who are close friends. So I'm not going to say, it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault, but this is a conversation that's happening. And I think that it's completely missed the point of how development works. Now, full disclosure, I am not a game developer. I don't know the ins and outs of development. However, I do know this. The idea, and I think the argument has been that, like, oh, well, Larian can do it, right? And Larian is not Rockstar. They're not Bungie. They're not Sony Santa Monica. They're a 400-person large studio, right? By any stretch. But they are not like one of these big studios with fuck you money.
Yeah,
right?
They're still technically independent, right?
Yeah, they're an indie studio. And
I used a term earlier in our conversation that I feel like is apropos, where I said they're an indie studio, but they're a prestige indie. Like they're technically, yes, they fall under the banner of independent development because they don't work with publishers. However, if you were looking at the development of Axiom Verge, which is one person, that is indie development, and Larian is also indie development. So at that point, you can't really make blanket statements about indie development and have it make any sense at all. So
yeah, like the indie developer I always think of is Supergiant, God bless.
Yeah.
They're like 20 people or so.
Yeah.
There's 20 times that at Larian, still within the same category, not, owned by a publisher, working with, certain money and such. Obviously, Wizards of the Coast is involved, the license holders and everything for Baldur's Gate, and Dungeons and Dragons and all the rest of it. That's there. They have, money, but it's not, fuck you, Rockstar money. It's the same way that Bungie was technically independent prior to the buyout from Sony in the intervening years between Activision and the Sony buyout. So,
yeah. So, the argument has basically been, well, look, Larian can do it, right? They released a game that doesn't have microtransactions. It's finished on launch. It's not buggy. It doesn't have all these technical problems. It just runs. It looks great. You can tell these people are passionate. What the hell is the rest of the industry doing, right? And that's been the sentiment that I have seen. And I think it completely misunderstands the facts, and B, like, Larian was in a very privileged position to be able to make the game that they did in the way they did, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 release, it doesn't have any of this stuff. Baldur's Gate 3 has been in early access for 3 years.
Yep.
Not 3 months, not 6 months. Yeah, since COVID, y'all, like 3 years.
Yeah.
When Baldur's Gate went into early access, I was not yet married.
Yeah.
Like, a lot has changed, right? Like, my career is completely different. My life
I was still a DualShockist at the time.
Yeah.
My
3
baby was
years
a
is
potato
really-
sitting in the corner of 2 rooms ago, a place that I lived.
Yeah, think about how your life has changed in 3 years and realize what a span of time that is, right?
Yeah.
And so while they were doing this, because they were selling the game at full price, and by the way, I have no qualm with this game is in early access. You can buy it if you want, right?
Yeah.
Like, you'll get the full thing when we're done. I think that is fine.
There's a perfect
Right?
split on this very show. Kris has been playing it a lot in its early access thing, and I said, I'm not playing it till it comes out. And we've both had, I feel comfortable speaking for you, you know, based on our conversations. We've both had positive experiences with it. You know,
Very much so.
and I think that speaks to it. I also think, Will, you're absolutely right. Larian, and the Larian of today isn't even the Larian from, you know, yonder years. You know, like
From Divine Divinity years, yeah.
Exactly.
Let alone
Yeah.
Divinity Original Sin 1 or 2.
How many
Yeah.
people of you have played Divinity Dragon Commander? Because I have.
I have.
Right?
It
Same
rules.
studio.
It's flawed
It
as
rules.
fuck. It rules.
It's so cool. But people who are coming into Larian now, right, off like Divinity Original Sin, Divinity Original Sin 2, like the stuff that they've done recently that really blew them up to this level of like, we're going to make Baldur's Gate 3, right? And the way we're talking about the studio now, that was not that studio.
yeah.
Not
it wasn't
very
even
long
the
ago.
studio at Original Sin 1. It's just Original Sin 2 that
Yeah.
blew it up.
I was gonna say that. I was
Either
gonna
if
say
it's a timing thing or I don't know what it was that really did it. But yeah. And I mean, deserved. That game rules also. But like Original Sin 1, most people haven't played that as much as they have 2. It
Yeah.
doesn't have as many fleshed out systems or whatever. I've dabbled in it. I played a little bit. I don't remember much of it.
yeah.
I
I played a little bit
also
of it as well.
It was like a decade ago, so I don't remember that much of it.
Yeah. Now,
Right,
if Larian had come out with Baldur's Gate 3 when they came out, and it was as polished and impressive as it is now, when Divinity Original Sin 1 came out, we could have this conversation. And it wasn't in early access or anything like that, but we're not there.
Right. And so, you know, not only have they been able to raise money for development, right? Because they've been selling it in early access. That gets you money that you can then put towards the development of the final game, right? So there's that. They've had 3 years to listen to feedback and implement feedback. And I think they almost completely rewrote one of the characters, right? Like, I think
They actually did. They had to hire a new voice actor for Will because they couldn't get the old one back, and they totally rewrote his plot. So
right. So imagine being able to do that, right? And also, like, that helps you test for performance issues because you have all these people with all these different hardware who are playing the game and giving you information. Whereas, you know,
trying to break the system because it's got lots of sandbox elements.
Yeah.
right. So you are not having the problem what a lot of studios have where they work on this game for several years and you do all the testing in the world, right? You test and test and test and test and test. And QA people are really good at their jobs. And developers are good at fixing bugs. Like, that's, you know, this is not like a these people aren't talented scenario. It's just you only have so much time. When Divinity Original Sin released, the weekend that it released, probably had more hours of just sheer playtime than the entirety of their testing. Because more people could play it. So, you know, and that's the norm for every game. You're going to find stuff that you don't find, and then you have to fix it, right? Which takes time. So this idea that, like, oh, you know, they came out of nowhere, they did this, they've been building goodwill for years. A lot of people love Original Sin, even if you didn't play it, right? You probably heard about it. You definitely heard about the second one. So they've built this goodwill over several years. And back farther than that, right? You've got us Dragon Commander sickos out here being like, yeah! And you've got a game that has had the benefit of all these things. Also, like, 400 people is a large studio, right? Like, most studios are not that big.
Yeah.
Indie or not. So they've had...
Yeah, there are AAA studios that are not that big.
Right. So they've had years and years and years of development time. I think 6 years total, which is a long dev cycle.
For sure.
3 of which is in early access. You can get feedback. You can raise money. You can test more because of that. They're working with an established IP. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm not playing this for Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, maybe you're not, but there are people there who are interested because it says Baldur's Gate on the box. Let's not lie about this, right? Also,
it's me.
hey,
I'm people.
Yeah, it's Brian, right? And again, this is not to slight anybody who's like, I love D&D, I love Baldur's Gate, like, I want to play the new one. That's great. But that is absolutely part of that audience, right? And so you have the things that you get as a result of that. In the same way, hey, what platform is it on right now? Just PC, right?
Yep.
Console
the Xbox
coming
version...
soon.
got delayed because they can't figure out how to make it work on Series S. So they're like, yeah, we're just delaying it, right? So, and then the PS5 version also they were doing staggered releases, one platform at a time, after all this development, all this testing, all this feedback, all the money that they've raised, right? And this idea that like, oh, well, why doesn't everybody else do that? Who is able to do that? Who has the money to do that? Who can put a game out on one platform? Because the early access really only works on PC, and we know this. There's a couple exceptions, right? Phantom Abyss.
You can also do it on Xbox, but it's more limited.
Yeah, early access on Xbox's rules. If you haven't played Phantom Abyss, go play that. It's an early access on Xbox. Great game. But most platforms don't have that, right? So if you're a console person, if you don't have a PC, you're not going to get access to that, right? If you're a console primarily focused developer, you're not going to get the benefit of that. Larian has a long history as a PC dev, so that's a benefit in this case. They've made games like this before. This is not a new thing that they're working on.
Their last 2 games were like this, to varying
We're like
degrees.
this.
Yeah.
They have a wealth of experience and time and money and pedigree and early access and all of this stuff that other studios just are not going to have. There are maybe 5 or 6 studios in the industry that could do this, or that either can do this or have enough money to be like, we don't care, right? Rockstar has fuck you money. Rockstar does not care. Rockstar will release the next thing when they are good and ready. Blizzard was like this for a really long time, and we could argue whether or not they still are, but Diablo 4 was in development for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
And they released it when it was done.
Yep.
Nintendo can sit on Tears of the Kingdom for years because they have billions of dollars in cash reserves. They don't need to release a game to hit a quarterly investor goal. They can sit on it because, hey, guess what? The Switch sells buckets. All their games sell buckets. It doesn't matter if Tears of the Kingdom takes an extra year. Yeah, we can just delay for a year and polish. How many studios can do that? How many publishers can do that?
There are publishers that can do it but refuse to. Activision could do it, but they won't because...
Yeah, and that's where we get into the whole executive business side of it, which is probably where a lot of the ire and discussion is coming from, what with the microtransactions and all that. But we'll touch on that after, so please continue.
Yeah. So, again, the amount of studios that can do this, extremely low. The amount of studios with the level of experience that Larian is working with in the genre that they have, by all rights, now mastered, right? Yes, okay. That have this early access, that have all this money. This is a unicorn. And the idea that everybody should take this process, which EA is not going to let a studio do this, ever. Activision isn't going to let them. They also had, the ability to have people who would let them do this.
Yeah.
Right? They were making the decisions that they could do this. And now it's, it's being used as a weapon against other developers who are like, oh, they don't care. They haven't fixed their game. Jedi Survivor is getting slagged on because it's like, it still has technical problems. Yes, patches are hard. When you're, especially on PC, there's thousands of hardware configurations that you have to test for. And when you solve the problem, you have to make sure that you haven't just created 5 more because that's how programming works.
Yeah.
Right? It takes time. And then it has to go through cert.
Which a lot of times you have to pay for.
Yeah, and that's a process too. That takes time. And so this idea that these companies don't care. Oh, Bungie can't make enough new content, but they have 1,800 developers. Bungie has at least 2 teams that we know of. One of them's working on Marathon, one of them's working on Destiny. And I think they have a 3rd thing in development that they've talked about, but we don't know what it is, right? So they're supporting a live service game. They're developing another thing. They also help other Sony-owned studios with their multiplayer infrastructure. They do a lot of stuff. It's not like every single one of those people is working on Destiny. And even if they were, they can make cosmetics. Yes, cosmetics are easy compared to multiplayer maps or new campaign stuff that takes everything. Cosmetics, you can have artists and modelers and basically your art team work on it. When you make something big, it takes everybody, right? You have to have design, you have to have writing, you have to have your artist, you have to have, prototyping, you have to have all this stuff, and then test. That is not the process for making a cosmetic.
And it's also not a linear process for different roles. Obviously, you get concept artists are very busy at the start of project, less so later. Often they'll be working on the next thing while everyone is actually programming the damn game. This is a thing.
And it also introduces things called production bottlenecks, which is when a whole group of people is waiting for another group of people to get done with something before they can even begin what they're supposed to do. And like with all systems, social or mechanical, the more moving parts you have, the more potential failure points you have. And that, it goes on and on and on and on.
Right. And so, Larian has been held up as this gold standard. Everybody should do it this way. And this is not in any way to say Larian isn't good at what they do, like Baldur's Gate is a fluke, like none of that, right? But the idea that it is applicable to almost anybody else is really silly. And then to use that and weaponize it against other studios who are not choosing like, oh, hey, like we have to release in this quarter because the executive said so, or we're running out of money and we're not going to get more. We're not going to get a delay, right? People are doing the best work they can with the time and resources that they have in the environment that they're in. And to say that they don't care, or nobody else has passion, or Larian is the only ones doing it right, or this should be the standard, just fundamentally misunderstands how this process works. And it's disrespectful to the people who are making the things that you enjoy, right? Nobody is sitting out here to be like, yeah, we want to make a terrible game. We want it to be flooded with microtransactions.
Yeah.
We want to nickel and dime you. Or like, the other recent thing is like Diablo 4, right? The first season has, been kind of rocky, right? And people are like, oh, why didn't they do it right the first time? Ah, yes, I forgot. I'm sorry. I should just press the do it right the first time button. No human being has
Path
ever
of Exile did that, right? No, they didn't. Path of
Yeah.
Exile got to where it is after like a decade of development, and it has seasons which are just terrible. It has decisions which are terrible. This, that, and the other thing. It's the same process. It sucks for Diablo that the first one they did was kind of but the core game makes up for it. Like, it's dipped a little bit in my estimation because of, but we sat here for 4 hours and talked about it in depth because I love that game.
Yeah.
I think it was great. It was my game of the year contender. If Baldur's Gate 3 didn't exist, I'd still be sitting on that point.
And
it is, that's where I'm at.
And also, like, we looked at the, Chris Metzenification of, Warcraft. And it's a classic scenario of, like the Batman line, you either die the hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. On a long enough timeline, these things are going to happen. The quality is going to drop. You can't hit 10 after 10 after 10 after 10 forever. You just can't.
Especially if you're trying to do something new, which
Yeah.
may not go that way. Or you're just going to get stagnant, in which case everyone's like, you're doing the same story again, bro.
Yeah, and you conversely, a lot of these sorts of issues, like Will was talking about, like given enough time and given enough money and given enough opportunity, I think that most development teams could find something good to make, could make something that is good or that is great. And I think that is laudable. I think that one of the reasons why that doesn't happen is a lot of these development teams just don't have enough time to get to that point. And that's why you get things that release that are like Battleborn, where it's like, this is just not, or Redfall, where it was like the team wanted to scrap it and they just were not given the opportunity to do that, whether because that was from, dictatorial action from the C-suite executives, or it was, pressure from investors to, make just absolutely asinine amounts of money, because that is the capitalist model of endless growth, which is not sustainable, and all that sort of stuff. But there are good takeaways from this, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if either of you have seen Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yes.
So
Yes.
basically, it's a documentary on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but it's great, and you should definitely go watch it. It is basically it's a documentary about the best sushi restaurant maybe in the world. And what I got out of it is one man's journey to perfection through repetition and iteration, which is something that Japan just philosophically is all about. And I think that there is something that can be learned in the striving for excellence, in wanting to do something really well, wanting to do a singular thing really, really well. And I think that Larian is honing in on that, but they're doing it on a really broad scale. And that, like Will said, and like we've discussed, is not feasible for the vast majority of developers, because we're talking about a CRPG set in the Forgotten Realms of Dungeons & Dragons, which is based on player expression. It's based on freedom. It's based on choice. When you introduce that many moving parts, it's really, really difficult to get everything working right. Because so many things can go wrong. That is why when you see things like Fallout or you see things like Skyrim, that's why they are buggy and janky as all hell. It's because you can do a lot, you can interact with a lot, and with that comes a lot of potential problems and a lot of potential bugs. I think that instead of throwing out blanket statements like this should raise the boat for everybody, I do think there are takeaways that we can have. Now, they're not necessarily takeaways from Baldur's Gate 3 in general, but rather from Larian's approach and from other developers' approaches. Like, we look at Supergiant, we've talked about them. We've talked about wanting our games to be shorter, wanting them to be more focused, saying that scope creep is a plague on the industry. Games are too long, they just overstay their welcome and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like there's also like this super another unhealthy thing is the equating of length and depth of a game with value, and that if something isn't 500 hours, it's not worth $60, which is ridiculous.
The gameplay per hour crowd, man, like
that is ridiculous. If you look, I mean,
I thought we'd buried that stuff years ago, but no, it keeps coming up.
I understand. We're on the verge of like a recession or depression and all that sort of stuff. But if you really want to get your bang for your buck, which I don't think is like a completely faulty thing to want. Like, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong to be like, I've got $60 in my pocket. It's not to say that playing, bad example, but Uncharted or something like that is going to be like not a good time, but like maybe buy Street Fighter, maybe buy Guilty Gear that you can just play, if you and your siblings or your friends can get together and play that for like forever. People are still playing Marvel 3. People are still playing freaking Smash Brothers Melee. Like,
people still play Street Fighter 2, bro.
Yeah. That is bang for your buck. And if you want a story-based thing, then go for that. But I do think that there is a takeaway that we can have, which is just like, try in as much as it is within your power to do what you can do. And if as a developer, you don't have 6 years to make some sprawling RPG, then don't try it. Like, don't do it. Do what you can do. And I think that is what I want to see people learn, because I want developers to be paid more, to work less, to make crappier looking games, and no, I'm not kidding.
Agreed.
I think that it is safe to say that all three of us here are gameplay forward gamers. We like mechanics. We like tight gameplay. We like stuff to be responsive and
we
feel
like
good.
systems. We like to tinker.
Yeah. Or we like to be made to think. And I think that level of deliberate focus is what I guess, if we're taking the spirit of the argument, not the points of the argument, if we're taking the spirit of the argument, like, let's focus up. Let's focus on what's important, and let's try to do the best that we can with what we have. And there is always going to be tension until, like, I don't even know what we could do besides, like, I don't even know if unions would, like, help, but, like,
it would be a good start.
It'd be a damn good start.
The pushback against, like, the investor crowd, like, the only real way to get around this is to be a privately owned thing and not be like a publicly traded company. But that is getting way into the weeds. But anyways, I've talked for entirely too long about this, but that's it. Sucks to see this discourse happen, but I do think that we can take this opportunity to hold Larian up for the good work that they have done, without talking out the other side of our mouth, derisively about other developers that are playing the best hand they have with the cards they got.
Don't shit on the developers, shit on the executives. Shit on the people who mandate that kind of stuff. Shit on the Bobby Koticks of the world that are paid like 75 to 100 times of the CEO of Nintendo. Like, that's, attack the marketing budgets, which is where a lot of the extra costs of game development goes. Attack that mentality, but not the devs, not the people who are just trying to do the best they can with what they have. And usually, they don't get they don't have, a good run of it. Like all the Activision Blizzard scandals and shit showed just how much a lot of those people were suffering and how much that is still ongoing as much as, efforts have been made. It's like, yeah, I get why developers come out and, get defensive. I get why players go out and go, why can't we have more like this? And it's an extremely nuanced and difficult conversation to be had. And ultimately, the case is simply don't attack these people, work with them to figure out why it is like it is, how it can be improved, and then go after the ones who really cause the problems. So what I'm saying is eat the rich, basically.
Yeah. And listen, I'm going to say this.
Guillotines are cheap.
Guillotines are cheap. $1,200, that stimulus check would go a long way if you put it towards the right stuff. Anyway, my point being, and the thing that I wanted to get out of this, and the reason I brought it up, praise Larian for what they have done, because they've done something remarkable by all accounts. I haven't played Baldur yet, but everybody I talk to is like, this game is amazing, right? So praise them for doing something remarkable, for doing a lot of really hard work to make this game what it is. But don't blame the other developers who are not in this situation, don't control their budgets, don't control their timeline, don't control who they work for, right? Like, don't blame those people for not being able to do the same things, because they're not in the same scenario. And who knows what they could accomplish if they were. But the reality is, when people get mad at like lazy developers or whatever, you don't hate the devs, you hate capitalism.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Bingo.
So please, if you're going to be upset with people, put it in the right place. Don't put it against the people who are making the stuff that you, right? They're not doing anything wrong. They're doing the best they can. Creative work is hard, and I don't care how good you are, eventually you're going to have misfires.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola directed some bad movies. He also did The Conversation, The Godfather 1, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now back to back to back to back. Great art is hard. All right? So, like, yes, we should have more like this. Yes, less microtransactions would be nice. All those things are true. But don't slag the people who can't do it because of the situation there. Praise the people who are making the great stuff that you love.
Very much so.
Praise be to Larian. Long may she reign.
Yes. One last point, just to touch on that as well. It's like all of this praise and all of this coming in, it's somewhat different because, well, just again, like as Will said, this is a unicorn, both in terms of development, costs, studio, etc. But it's also a case of Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 2 being one of the best games ever made.
Yeah. As
voted upon by 2 of the 3 people here, at least.
Best game ever made, depending on who you ask on this call.
Yeah, and it was like, that game was incredible. It was formative. It was the RPG for a while, arguably only, bested or equaled by Planescape Torment, made, a year earlier, basically.
Yeah.
And just that game, a sequel was penciled by Black Isle Studios, but was never completed, never put into practice. A lot of its concepts got carried over and eventually became, Obsidian doing Pillars of Eternity, at least some of that, because Chris Avellone was still writing for all of that. But for the longest time, Baldur's Gate as the true IP, like you have the Dark Alliance spin-offs or whatever, but there was no Baldur's Gate 3 for 20 years, and most people who love Baldur's Gate 2 were like, that's probably fine, because we don't think anybody could live up to it appropriately. And when it was announced back in 2019, 2020 or whatever, it was actually officially unveiled as, Larian is doing Baldur's Gate 3. I remember sitting there and going, I didn't know it was Larian at first. I saw Baldur's Gate 3, and I sat there and went, I feel trepidation at this. Who would they get to do this? BioWare nowadays, trash. It wouldn't do it. Most of the people who made BioWare a household name, not there anymore.
Yeah.
Obsidian, I don't know. They're not firing on all cylinders either at that time. Yeah, the Chris Avellone stuff was, he was still basically just being cancelled and all that. Cleared of all that now. Go, support him. He's a great writer. So all of that happened. I'm just like, I don't know who would do it. And then it's like, it's Larian. I looked at that. I looked at Divinity Original Sin 2 and went, this is probably the only acceptable developer for this project, this IP, this license. Let's see what they got. Let them cook. And they did. And what we have is worth it, but it's been a long road to get here, and if it wasn't Baldur's Gate, it probably wouldn't have had that same kind of prestige, effort, consideration put into it. Because even Hasbro and Wizards knew what the hell they were sitting on. They knew, which is why they sat on it and pushed back against multiple pitches and attempts, including by BioWare and Obsidian at various points in their histories, to go, yeah, we'll make a Baldur's Gate 3. And they're like, no, you won't.
Yeah.
We'll wait. And here it is, finally.
You said let Larian cook, and Larian sagely, wisely followed the best
on slow cook.
The best advice for cooking: the low heat over a long period. And there you have it. That's how you cook one great Baldur's Gate 3.
And I still haven't finished it, so I don't know if it holds up all the way through.
Yeah, me neither.
I've heard some people say, a few more complaints towards the end, possibly also understandable because pretty much all of Act 1 was in early access and we went over it multiple times. I still have perceptions of characters that are no longer true.
Yeah.
Because of things that have changed. And
I think I'm still in the first act, actually.
Well, we can talk about that. So
yeah.
Are we basically done with this topic? Shall we move on to Baldur's Gate 3 itself?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I wanted to say about Baldur's Gate 3, we've kind of said just by allusion. But if you've got something more to say, I mean, I generally was just going to give like an early impressions, of it, which is it's good. I'm really enjoying it. When I'm not playing it, I'm thinking about playing it. I'm really excited to find, like we were talking about, almost Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom style solutions to problems. I'm going to jump up this cliff. Oh, what happens if I do this over here? And it's like, yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, it's pretty cool.
It's a spiritual successor to Divinity Original Sin 2, which means you can do a lot of stuff with the surfaces on the ground. Yeah. It's not as much, it's not as front and center as it was in Original Sin 2, which is like the core, basically, mechanic and manipulation. Yeah. But it's all still there, and you can still do it. You can do some dumb shit. I have done some dumb shit. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
There's also a few Larian staples in there, which me and my friend have basically what we call the Larian bingo card. Just a few little things that they just seem to have in a lot of their games that come up, and we're just like, I see you. I know what you are.
Yeah.
Squirrels. Friggin' mad doctors doing crazy surgery shit. An encounter which there is a good ending, but it's basically heavily scripted to not get you that good ending unless you really, really rig the system. Yeah. And I have a save file in order to do just that, which I dubbed Operation Storage Wars, because it involved a lot of boxes. Yeah. But just with all that said, the game is incredible. The game is remarkable. It's not without flaws, naturally, but like what you are able to do and the level of sandbox and such you are able to manipulate there is comparable to, if not in excess of, Tears of the Kingdom levels. And unlike Tears of the Kingdom, which I tend to go, there's fundamental issues with that game that could use tightening or addressing. Baldur's Gate 3 has a lot less of those. Yeah. The fundamentals are stronger. The combat systems are, at their base, a little better. The writing is more consistent, more stronger, more character focused.
I mean, the writing in Baldur's Gate is just like the writing in Zelda is not great.
It's not a thing, of course not. Yeah. But like the reason I bring it up is like it's fine in Tears of the Kingdom. In Breath of the Wild, it actively was a detriment to my experience of the game.
Yeah.
It's just like, get me the fuck out of here and get me back in the sandbox.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, this is why when people ask me what my favorite game of all time is, I say it's a tie for first, because it's a tie between Super Metroid, which has almost literally no writing, like the intro scroll, and then I don't even think the end has anything.
It says like 2 lines at the end. That's basically it. Everything else
see
is
you on the next
non-verbal.
adventure or something like that. And then Baldur's Gate 3, which has so much dialogue and so much writing.
Baldur's Gate 2.
2. Yes, that's right. And it has so much, and it hits so hard, and it does so many things. Like Baldur's Gate 2 is scope. It's excellence at volume. Like it is just breadth and beauty and all of these different systems, and everything is working. Like that's why Baldur's Gate 2 is great. And Super Metroid is beauty and perfection in focus. It is atmosphere and gameplay and exploration, and that's what it is. And it masters.
I love that you found a way to make this like about Super Metroid. Never changed, Brian.
But yeah, like that
it's
is
worth it.
And I think that is, you know, there's something to be said about that. And I do feel like Zelda suffers by comparison, because it does have, like, the combat is fine. It's okay.
It's fine.
The exploration, I think, in Zelda is great. I think the puzzle solving is great. I think that those things are really what elevates it. The story is nothing, basically. Like it's
an excuse point for the large part.
Yeah. And they repeat things over and over and over and over and over again. And so that's why I think that Baldur's Gate 3 has surpassed Zelda for me, I think, so far. It's going to have to biff the landing to drop back down, but Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely in my top 3, maybe my top 2, maybe my top 1. We're going to see. We're going to see what happens.
The year is young. We still have Armored Core and Cyberpunk and Starfield.
Yep.
That's going to be contender. And everything else coming up. So
we have a lot of stuff. Coming out. And Sea of
and
Stars.
there's still Street Fighter being great. Yeah.
Yep. But anyways, yeah. Go out, play yourself a Baldur's Gate. Play yourself a Chasing of the Battles. Get yourself some Beasts via cassette. Final Fantasy yourself up some 16s.
Be a teenage exocolonist, you know.
Yep.
Go fight in the streets.
Go practice your pugilism on the parkways. You know,
go to hell and kill the devil. Like, it's a great year for games. Play good shit.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a year. Yeah. God damn.
And with that, I think we're going to wrap up. But anyways, thank you all for joining us for episode 284 of the Platformers Podcast. If you want to watch us record these episodes live, check us out at twitch.tv/Ribnax, RIBNAX. And I archive them later on my YouTube channel. You can search at Ribnax on YouTube to find it. One thing that you should definitely go check out on YouTube is Will and I ran a tournament. We streamed it. Will TO'd it. We both commented it with some other people. We did number 1 of Golden Weeklies, spelled Wii like the Nintendo Wii. But this is a like small community that we are a part of, that I created, that has grown and become very, very cool. And now we've got enough people that are into fighting games in there to host these tournaments. So you should go over to my YouTube channel and check out Golden Weeklies number 1, a tournament series. And we did Guilty Gear Strive and we did Street Fighter 6, and it was a lot of fun. Will, I don't know if you have anything to say about that before I move on with other plug stuff.
No, just, we're going to do it every week, so come out.
I'm going to get in on it when I can.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Watch me cook in Guilty Gear.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Congratulations to our winners. I did better in both tournaments than I expected. I kind of just expect to get washed all the time, but I actually did pretty well. Got third in Strive, which is not bad.
Well done.
Small pool, but these are the first tournaments that I have not gone like 0 and what question mark in, so that's progress, right? But anyways, as I said, you can check out my Baldur's Gate 3 character and class guides over on GameSpot. I've also got, later this week, I've got a preview going up on IGN.com for a little game called Deceit 2, which I am excited for people to read about. Yeah, if you want to talk to me on social media, I'm on Blue Sky at Brian Barnett, and Twitter and Instagram and all that sort of stuff at Ribnax, RIBNAX. Yeah, there you go. Kris, where can everybody find you?
Hi, you can find me on my website, versusthebacklog.com, VS, one word, where I do all sorts of big write-ups on games and whatever the hell I'm doing. It's been dormant for a little bit, still working on it, get into it. You can see everything else I've been doing there. I am on Twitter. I don't care to call it its new name. At Delphia, that's EI, not IE. I don't use it that much, but you can say hi, and I will try to get around to it. Otherwise, you can find me around the internet. How about you, Will?
You can find me on Twitter at Will Borger. That's BY Will Borger. My last name is spelled the same as it is here. If you want to see some stuff I've done, I did a preview for Battle Shapers at IGN, which I've talked about. If you are playing Dave the Diver, I also wrote the entire walkthrough for that, also on IGN, and I've written the walkthrough for Season 1 of Diablo 4. I also wrote previews for Tekken 8 and Project L at the Loadout, so please read those. And I've got some other things coming up that I can't talk about just yet. So.
A lot of stuff going on in the world of the platformers.
Busy.
From everybody here at the platformers, we hope you have a wonderful week and stay safe out there, because until next time, we are out.
Back to Baldur's Gate 3.